ego sees problems, consciousness sees solutions, right? And that's basically what we're going for right there, is that as this is the new way that we are going to be having to lead, because the generations that are next and next and next are talking more and more about this.
Well, hello and welcome to the Leadership Growth Hour, an interactive monthly event that features timely leadership topics and tools to grow your leadership performance. I'm your host, Daniel Stewart, executive consultant and coach and president of Stewart Leadership, a global consulting, coaching, and training firm aligning organizations on leadership, teaming change, and talent. In short, we develop the people side to enable your growth strategies. Today, I'm excited and honored to be joined by leadership and belonging expert Tim Davisson, executive consultant and business development director with Stewart Leadership. Welcome, Tim.
Hey there, Daniel. Thank you, and welcome everyone.
Our show is divided into two parts. The first half is content conversation on a specific leadership topic, and the second part is open Q&A from the audience on any topic. As we are talking, please write your questions and comments in the Q&A feature, as the chat feature is not enabled in the webinar version here. Okay, now on to today's focus area, shifting from burnout to belonging, a very timely, important topic here. Okay, Tim, burnout and belonging have such an interesting relationship. We're going to get to that relationship and dive into all of these aspects here. Let's start with burnout for a moment. How is burnout showing up these days? How is that maybe different across the generations? What does that look like these days?
Yeah, I mean, I can only say from where I'm at in this world, but I would say that burnout can happen. We can see burnout in many different ways inside of organizations. We can see it by, we've heard about people just not showing up, meaning that they're there, but they're not there. So that's like one way we can see burnout. To others, we can see it on the other extent, which is people working so hard that they are just stuck in a almost like a trauma loop of just like this continual work and not thinking about other things. I can say from and something that you and I have talked about, which is, millennial burnout, I think is real. I can say that from myself, from my own experience, but then also my friends who are around the same age, who were all grew up in that 80s and 90s, were in high school during 9/11. And then, we lived through a recession and trying to find jobs and, just after everything, just us trying to figure out how to catch up and get ahead, and recognizing that it's a tough world, even more out there now, having to live through a pandemic. And that's why we're seeing all this change, not just within millennials, but I think within everyone.
You've called out so many factors that influence our mental health, our perspective, especially around expectations. How do managing these expectations come into play to burnout? How are you seeing that? Maybe even on a personal side, but as you work with clients as well, what would you say?
This is, I think, a constant thing that every organization is trying to figure out right now. So I don't know if there's like an exact answer about how to manage it. But I will say that I always go back to, and this is what I tell our clients as well as my friends and family, is that it eventually goes back to knowing that other human on the other side that you're talking to, either virtual or face to face. And I think managing burnout is I think you can try to do it in a massive way, and that's where you can get into these burnout programs and get leadership programs and things like that to help people with it. But I think it ultimately goes down to knowing who you're working with and knowing the people around you, and getting to know them from a human perspective, and making sure that your neighbor, either it be your QB neighbor or your physical neighbor at your home, is okay. Making sure that we're interacting with people within humanity, I think, is the first step to supporting an organization and filling in cases of burnout and belonging.
Those are great comments. And I'm wondering, Tim, let's get some involvement here from those who are listening. A simple question in the Q&A. Is your organization worried or concerned about burnout? Are you having to work through this? Is there a concern there? Simply type in yes or no. We love to kind of get a sense of where are people's mindsets? What experiences are they having? Are there organizations focusing on and concerned about burnout itself from an employee perspective, from a leader perspective? Just jump on in terms of the Q&A. Type in yes or no, or maybe a quick comment. Are you seeing this as a concern in organizations, either for yourself or broader, or even if you're working with as a consultant with other organizations? And we're seeing some comments coming in. A lot of trying times. It's yes. I mean, this is what's fat, and I'm sure we'll just keep seeing this specifically in leadership. You know, Tim, as we're seeing more and more of these comments coming in, talk to me in terms of the leader burnout. Because yes, employees, is there an additional sense of responsibility and what that looks like when a leader gets burned out? It's not just about them. It can then continue on. And anyway, talk to me about the implications then of a leader being burned out.
I mean, from a level of, you know, as a previous chief revenue officer, that's immediately where my head goes is immediately, what is this going to affect for one, the bottom line, but also how is it going to affect that functional area that leader is in? You know, we get brought in a lot of the times, and those probably in the chat, you know, get brought in if you're a leadership professional trying to figure out, you know, we have a leader who's you know, leaving a lot of damage behind them. That could be a early indication or an indication that that leader is not only having challenges with, you know, leading through what the challenge in the organization is, but having to deal with other things at home and burnout. I mean, that's going to be a really key differentiator in how you are going to be as successful in your business, as well as within that functional area as a leader. I mean, that's like going to be the first thing that you're going to see.
And you mentioned such a key point, at home or outside of the workplace. And so much of the pandemic has blurred the lines between the professional and the personal. I mean, you know, we've all seen inside people's homes through Zoom and Teams. We see all sorts. How does that play into this potential burnout? Because suddenly leaders have to consider all sorts of additional factors.
Yeah, I think that's just kind of what the situation is with leadership. And I think why leadership is so important right now, because we are asking leaders to not only be stewards of the business, but we're asking leaders to be stewards of the people as well as the earth. And this is because, as we've seen it in today's economic and political climate, governments and religion have not withstood the needing to kind of move our culture as a business culture. So we're now asking business leaders to kind of step into this new role, and that's a lot of pressure. And there's a lot of leaders who might not have the skills and capabilities to do this. And so what is that causing inside of an organization? Could be a burnout of that leader, but then we worry about those who I go to immediately is those who are primarily the most disadvantaged in our organizations are the ones who are most going to experience burnout, especially with working at home. I mean, we think about all of us who are, you know, we could talk about white collar, you know, we were able to jump on our computers. But those who are never on the computer or don't have clear Wi-Fi or live in areas that don't have access to what we get in big cities, those are the people that we as leaders should start to worry about first as the work environment is starting to change, because that's what good leadership would be.
Paying attention to everybody. And so that leads a great segue into this belonging idea. let's touch upon this, Tim. How do you define what is it when somebody says, "Hey, we need to work on belonging"? What does that mean? What does that conjure in your mind?
So when I hear that, it's never that though. I don't think people ever come and say, like, I need to work on belonging.
Fair,
Because
yes.
I think belonging shows up where we don't expect it to show up. So like, and it could all go back to it. I go back to, how do you start to create good team belonging? As a leader, trying to think through how do I create a really good team that they feel that we are supporting them and that they are part of this. The first thing that I always go to is how can we create opportunities for creativity? Because we are humans. Humans are not, we are not designed to work. We are designed to create. And so as we create things together, and that co-creation creates belonging. So how can we design experiences inside of organizations that are creative and that are part of a co-creation activity of some sort? Those are the things that I look, and it's not about creating new things. It's about looking inside of the organization and being like, here's an opportunity where we can bring some people from different groups and different areas together to create something. And I can almost guarantee every time that will start to naturally create a belonging feeling where those people want to work together. They want to work more collaboratively. They want to work in less conflict. They want to create something that they're all proud of. Like that's the type of environment that we all want to work in and that we all want to try to create. And when we hear that people are having conflict and they're having issues like that, that is when we start to have breakdown in belonging.
You're also reminding me when I think of creativity or to create something, I think of choice and the ability to be able to choose for yourself to then do something. And the irony is, in burnout, when we are in that burnout mindset, we feel we don't have a choice necessarily, or we have to just keep going down one path and it's not helping us. Yeah. And yet the antidote is often to then remind we have a choice and that we can then create something, but how to get back to that mindset, that is such a hard leap, although that is often where the solution lies. Talk a little bit more about how that connection and how do you make that leap?
So let me make sure I'm understanding correctly. So how to make that leap from creativity to what?
It's more like the leap when you're in that burnout situation where you don't think you have choice. However, in order to help you get out, it's actually through choice, remembering you have options and choices. Yeah. You can manage this and you can then feel more empowered and belong because of and through this choice.
Yes. So for there, I would talk to a leader about going back to our self-awareness skills. So going back to, I am experiencing a situation that is, I am conscious. So I talk about conscious leadership a lot when we are talking about belonging. How are we conscious of the situation that we are all in? So think about, I have an experience myself, so like I have worked inside of organizations where I didn't feel like I belonged because of my own identity. So there's a part of feeling belong because you have a block because of it. And the other half is it could be it's the responsibility of the organization. We're all in a contract with each other, physically or not, when we go and work with each other, right? So that means that there is some push and pull polarity that I'm dealing with when I'm working inside of an organization. So I always say, I focus back on what I can control, and I can control myself, which goes back to self-awareness, thinking about, okay, this is the situation I'm in. This is what's going on. How can I be conscious of the way that I feel right now? And what can I do to not feel that way? So I think, and then on the other side, I think it's also really important for the organization to think through the lens of the individual and say, hey, we want to create experiences where people can feel like they are belonging, and so once we or feel that they are creating something, and so once you have the experience and the self-awareness that that you're conscious of your situation, the organization is conscious of the situation, that's where we create psychological safety, and that's where we start to create belonging.
Let's stay on that one and go to the next point in terms of what are those types of experiences that an organization or a team can then provide to help people feel that they can belong? Because there's a sense of responsibility. Each of us need to do that for ourselves. Yes. And then there's a sense of responsibility for the leader, manager, organization. What are some examples, some ways of that an organization or team can then foster a sense of belonging more broadly?
Yeah, I love this because this is where where I would start to design action development projects. But I wouldn't call them action development projects because nobody likes to be on an action development project. But as a leader, I have a punch list of stuff that I need to just get done, because it's aligned to the goals and the mission of my organization. So what I like to do is go through that punch list and be creative and think about, okay, where can I bring in more people and where can I help them create something? I, again, go back to creativity, Daniel. I have an example is that, I'm working with an organization that's trying to increase the amount of revenue that they're doing for this quarter. And so they're working with their marketing and their sales teams. So I suggested, and we were talking about this through conversation, like, let's get a strike team together from different parts of the team to almost start doing some A/B testing of innovation to see if they can come up with new ways to start to create leads or start to create new revenue. And so you get people together to start to create something. Then what happens is they're like, oh, those people are doing something. And then we're like, well, they're going to bring things together and they're going to share it with us all. And so then that starts to create larger group thinking in that kind of way. So it's a way that you can kind of deal with business challenges at the same time as bringing people together and then including everyone in the process as we are going through this kind of A/B testing. We do this a lot in the startup world and in the innovation space, so that we can consistently try to innovate as well as still feel like we are like we're belonging to something and not working in a silo somewhere else.
I'm hearing several things. I'm hearing bringing people together, having them focus on something exciting, some creative, some option for them to then make them feel that they're making a difference. And then again, goes back to that choice idea. Okay, so let's run this and to the point that it might be too much because we have so many actions going on. Thus, it's the prioritization and figuring out where we spend our time. And type A personalities, which there are many out there, are going to inevitably want to do it all. How this prioritization process, how does it work? And how does it relate to that burnout? Because people can live on that verge of burnout if they aren't careful. How do people prioritize all of these actions that sound great, but maybe not right now?
Yeah, that's a great question because I'm challenged with that a lot. And what I like to do is start to think through like a flow, like what is my flow going to be for my week, for my season, for my quarter, and what does that flow look like? Because that can help create. I'm not a big believer in work-life balance. I don't think it exists. because I think balance in its own sense is that you're trying to the word balance gives me anxiety. So like, why would I want to have a work-life balance? I would want to have a work-life harmony. And what that work-life harmony looks like is how can I align my life around having to work rather than my work and my life balancing. And so it's like, I used to work with a lot of Europeans, and they would always say, I don't live to work. I work to live. And so how do we do that? And so I think through the lens of flow. So what I generally do, Daniel, is think through where do I feel my most energy? So starting to get really connected to yourself. Where do I feel my most energy? For example, I like to not work on not work, but I like to not have meetings on Mondays so that it's a way for me to kind of flow. I implemented that at my previous organization, and it increased. We only had meetings on Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, and then mornings of Fridays. That was a way for us to kind of time box things, to help people to get more space for them to start thinking more clearly, and not get on the verge of burnout. So there's just like these little like tips and tricks that we can do. There's tons of them out there. And I think the first step is just starting to talk to your people and knowing what's going on in their life so that you can create the space for them to be in more of a flow rather than a balance.
This harmony idea, this integration, instead of like finding the perfect balance at all time, not realistic is what I'm hearing. And so it's this harmonizing. And you've also reminded me, something that we are hearing a lot from clients is everybody is our own chief energy officer, our own CEO in some ways, as cheesy as that sounds, but it's the chief energy officer. And so what are some approaches, Tim, that you see work that help us manage our own energy as we're seeking to, yes, be there, adding value all the time, whether we can afford to have no meetings on Monday or not? I mean, there's all sorts of things to consider, but what do you find are great ways of helping us be our own chief energy officer?
So I would say first thing, and this is what I recommend, always talk to people about, is your first couple of minutes that you wake up, think of it as when we first started, when computers first started, I'm an elder millennial, so I remember this. When computers were first there, it would take some time for that computer to boot up, right? And there's a whole story of Steve Jobs and saying like he wanted it to be, it's the first computer, it took 2 minutes, and then he got it down to like 20 seconds, but give yourself some time to boot up in the morning. And also remember that when you boot up, you're starting on your home screen. This is naturally what occurs in our brains in the morning. When we wake up, we're naturally on our home screen, meaning like we are in a place of self when we wake up. And that is a place of curiosity, it's clarity, it's confidence. You're also in a place of creativity and connectedness. And so this is a great time as you sit there to just kind of reflect on what you want to get out of the day. Like, what did you have a limited amount of time? What do you want to achieve that day? And make sure it's not something that's achieving something. It might be at work, but I try to just say, I want to try to achieve, taking the trash out today. That's a really hard thing for me on trash day, is remembering to take it out before I hear the trash man down the street. That's just something I pick one thing that I try to focus on and just kind of let everything else not happen. That's kind of what I do. Another thing that I like to do is once I wake up and do my reboot in the morning, is I like to kind of go through a list of what are the priorities that I need to take care of that day. And so it's being really intentional about how you're spending your time boxing it. And also, when I start to get stressed out throughout the day, if it does happen, I take a moment to get out, walk around. I know we all do that. But I also take a moment to just kind of remember that this is just an experience I'm having today, and to be in a better place of consciousness, to know that this is who I am today. This is what's happening to me today. And I just need to take it one step at a time. And just kind of telling yourself that throughout the day will become easier and easier and easier and easier as those days go by.
So some other things I was going to ask you before I do that, I want to open it up. Anybody who has a question, especially around the mental health component of burnout or belonging, what that means, what that looks like, please feel free to type it into the Q&A, and we can then reference it, and we'll get to as many questions as we can. As folks are thinking through and typing any of the questions that they have, back to you, Tim, a question here around clarity breaks. I love what you're talking about and the need to build in clarity breaks. And you're reminding me of a great metaphor of that computer. In fact, I still have the Apple IIe beginning sounds as it opens up. Anyway, that was great. But the computer runs continuously. However, we as humans, we pulse. We can have moments where it's high energy, and we also need moments where it's lower energy. The trick is when we do not allow ourselves to be able to have moments of lower energy, to take breaks, whatever that looks like. And so I guess the question back to you, Tim, is what do some of those breaks look like? Because admittedly, when people hear breaks, they might think, well, I'm wasting time. I'm not being as productive. I'm falling far behind. How do you balance that while taking these clarity breaks in your mind?
It doesn't need to be a long time. And it's okay, because it's still gonna, like, life's still gonna go on even if it doesn't happen. So first it's like recognizing like it's gonna move on. What I tend to do is, Daniel, I'm kind of a Pilates person. and it takes me about less than 2 minutes to do a Pilates roll down, which is basically I start and I kind of roll my body down, and at the same time I breathe, and it's reconnecting my breath to my body. And what that does is I have a Pilates instructor that says, don't worry about anything unless that's where your feet are. So I remember when I do my roll down and my breath that I am here, this is my experience, and it slows time down for a second, and it slows down your heartbeat, and it reconnects your body with your experience that you're having right now. And it takes less than 2 minutes. And you could do it at standing at your desk, you can do it sitting at your desk. Everyone needs 2 minutes, like you can coach somebody in 2 minutes. You can definitely breathe in 2 minutes.
And so what I'm hearing from you is also a focus on the physical, because too often we are sitting, we're in meetings, it's cerebral instead of the movement, and we are built to move.
Yes.
And we need to be able to move in ways, and that does so much good in so many ways for us as well.
Absolutely. Movement, I think, is probably the best thing that we can do for our bodies and our mind to help create energy to then cut against burnout, but then also to move past that burnout into a belonging state, which is how can I stop thinking more about what my experience is, but how am I making sure that the experience of people around me is better? Because that's what good leaders do.
Okay, so I'm going to play this out, and I'm going to go a little extreme, but I want your reactions as we do this. So if I'm a leader and I'm hearing, we've been talking for 30 minutes thus far. If I go back to my team and say, okay, everybody, we want to build and strengthen belonging. So we're going to be doing creative stuff, and we're going to be focusing on movement. Now, admitted that's not necessarily but that's essentially what we're saying. What are ways that a manager or leader can translate that so that people are like, oh, that's a good point. How do you communicate this?
Oh, well, I would love a manager to come after that and say that. I mean, that would be ideal. It's never happened in my life. But I would honestly say the easiest thing that I would recommend is, think of little things that you're going to do already in your day that you can turn into a movement activity. Okay. So, I have a team meeting and we're virtual. How different would it be is if we had a virtual team meeting and you said, hey, I'm going to go on a walk. Anyone can join me if they would like. This is not going to be a Zoom call. This is just us talking, and I'm going to go on a walk around the neighborhood. So we're like physically moving and walking around and talking. So it's like what we used to do is a walk and talks when we were all in the office. Well, this can be a virtual walk and talk. I mean, that's the best thing to do. And that's going to already encourage. It's not about coming and saying, this is what I'm going to do. It's actually doing it. It's taking action. It's being that modeled behavior, because that's what good leadership is.
Even if it's uncomfortable for the leader, because, there are certain norms that we think of as a leader. I don't say this, or I do say, what you're suggesting is to kind of begin to break that mold. Absolutely. And to suggest and do things that are maybe more traditionally outside of the typical workplace ideal, because either it's hybrid, virtual, okay, we need to live that way and live and lead differently.
Yeah. I think being a leader, we should always be a little uncomfortable. I mean, that just shows that you have some authenticity. You're trying different things. You're portraying the behavior that you want your people to have, so like, I think trying new things and going out is part of that leadership experience. And it's part of being uncomfortable, but also remembering that everyone's uncomfortable. That's part of the human experience in itself. And so I think being a leader, you can tap into these really cool opportunities for you to be uncomfortable, but then also share that feeling with others as well, but also showing it, that's how you start to spark belonging. Yeah, absolutely.
As folks are listening to this, feel free to chime in with your own questions on these topics or others. Feel free to just enter them in as you wish. Tim, let's talk for a moment about identity, because oftentimes that plays a part in terms of, do I feel like I belong, or do I feel like I don't belong? And how to help people look at their own authentic self and to show up in a way that they can then contribute in meaningful ways. Otherwise, they can easily feel not included. How does somebody go about the process of kind of reflecting on themselves? And then the other part is, how can a manager help shape and influence in positive ways that identity as well? So both angles, themselves and a manager or leader, to help them with this identity question.
Oh man, when you were talking about that, the first thing that I went back to was the first time that I ever got a 360. That was the first time that I started to do some of that own self-reflection. So now, as someone who facilitates 360s, I always say this is the best gift you will ever receive, because feedback is a gift, right? And so that was the first thing that I went to is, if you haven't gotten a 360, I mean, ask your manager to have one. And I'm not any of them. I mean, we have great ones here. But like, I think that would be like my first step of like recognizing my own self-awareness, and then asking also my direct reports, opening a conversation with them on how they're feeling, as well as a 360 is a great way to start if you're not a big feeler or comfortable talking about feelings as a leader. A 360 is a great place to start there. I would say identity, this is something that we didn't really talk about in business when I first started working, and it's really hard to, as a leader, to be like, wow, I have to worry about, my responsibilities, and then I have to worry about everyone else's, like that's really hard. And so the first place that I go is thinking about, what would it be if somebody cared the way I wanted them to care about me? and going through like your own self and having some of that self-reflection, being like, when was there a time that I didn't feel comfortable? And then start to identify, is that happening inside of the organization? Because it's probably something related to that person's identity or who they show up as. We also can look at data. We know that that burnout and belonging is affected to our BIPOC community more than any other community inside of an organization. So knowing that we already have people through data that is telling us that they are more likely to feel burnout and belonging. So let's also make sure that we are aware of the data and other things that we know as leaders who are the most susceptible to these challenges because of their own identity, that they didn't choose to be themselves, or they didn't choose. We know none of us had a choice.
Right. It's how we arrive into this world, and then we work through this, and it's for others to then help support and recognize as well as we do it together.
Yes.
And what I'm also hearing from you is none of this is an individual sport. It is a team sport to be able to then be effective, not only in the organizational world, but at life, and to be able to recognize that this combining this interactivity is a positive thing. And it's actually a solution to help us become better ourselves,
Absolutely.
as well as the organization.
Absolutely. Ego sees problems, consciousness sees solutions, right? And that's basically what we're going for right there, is that as this is the new way that we are going to be having to lead, because the generations that are next and next and next are talking more and more about this. They are smarter than I was, they're better at it than we are. And so it's now our turn to upskill our behavior so that we can better communicate and be better leaders about talking about, belonging, and making sure that we are the better stewards of the business, better stewards of people, and better stewards of the earth. Like, that is the challenge of this new leadership paradox.
One of the other words that is often discussed here is loneliness, which again is one of those things. A few decades, we would never be talking about loneliness within the business context, but loneliness and burnout go hand in hand. And one can lead to the other and vice versa, and reinforces it. It's all of this. I'm the only one. I'm the only one trying to do all of this work, or I'm the only one responsible for this choice, or it's all on me, instead of looking to see how can I turn it into we. And so keep talking, Tim, in terms of what else can leaders do to help prevent that sense of loneliness that can emerge, especially from a hybrid or virtual situation, to then translate that into a belonging, into a we mindset.
Yeah, I don't think we can stop anyone from feeling not lonely. I think that's, again, part of the human experience. But I also think that we as leaders can check in on our people more than what the weather is. What I mean by that is that's the easiest question for a leader in a virtual space to ask somebody. How's the weather, Daniel, where you're at? Oh, that's great. Let's jump into our agenda. That's not going to tell me anything about the human that I'm working with on the other side. I came up with a really easy framework to use. Talk about your EPM, which is how you're feeling emotionally, mentally, and physically, or emotionally, physically, and mentally. EPM. That's what I always think about. So it doesn't mean you have to sit there and ask people, how are you feeling emotionally? How are you feeling mentally? How are you feeling physically? But you can actually frame questions. So how does your body feel today? Like, when's the last time you've been asked that, Daniel? How's your body feel today?
Not too often, but yes, it's an interesting, and then however you reframe it to fit that situation, but it's talking about how their health movement. Yes.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Is everything going okay with you today? Like, like you're smiling. What happened? Use these physical cues to get more curious. That's all people need to not feel lonely. You told me a couple days ago, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. That stuck with me. Let's use them. So it means listen more and be intentional with what you say. And that helps with people to feel less lonely. And it doesn't mean that you need to help them, get into therapy and be cross many boundaries in an organization. No, that doesn't mean that. What it means is asking more than what is the weather.
Sometimes there is fear from a leader to then ask those kinds of questions. Maybe not to ask the questions, but because of what might come from those questions. And they don't know how to handle it. And they're like, I don't know if I want to know, or if I know, I don't know how to help. And therefore, I'm not going to ask that kind of question. What can a leader do to kind of manage that tendency sometimes and overcome it, frankly?
Try it in a safe space first. Try it with your partner. Try it with your kids. Try it with someone who you don't know what question they're going to get. And then you're just like, hey, I don't know what to say about that. And it's still okay to say, I don't know what to say. But it's also just ask yourself, wow, if I felt like that, what would I want to hear at that moment?
Yeah, start small, start in a safe space.
Yeah. And what I've also learned is, when you give somebody a space to talk about themselves, the best thing to say is, tell me more. And then that turns into even a better conversation than, oh, it's supposed to rain this afternoon. I know it's going to be uncomfortable, but that's what leadership is. Again, leadership, you should always feel a little uncomfortable.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you the one thing question.
Okay.
So with this great topic today, talking about how do you go from burnout to belonging, what's the one thing that a leader can do to help people shift more to belonging? What would you say, Tim?
I would say that the one thing that they can do is, if you don't know your employees' pets' names, I'm just making this really simple and easy. It means you need to know them a little bit more, or if you not necessarily their pet, but at least their partner, or their kid, or something like more than where they live or something. It needs, and so belonging starts with the leader. It starts with you. So knowing who you are, your authenticity. So going back to one thing, okay, now that I got it, is reflecting on yourself and asking yourself, do I know more than what's the weather at where my employee works or lives, in a virtual space?
Yeah.
Because if you don't know much about that employee, it means that they may have challenges around their identity. It means like confidence and things like that. And that's what a leader does, is try to create more leaders.
It sounds like it's really going down to making sure you know people.
Yeah.
And it's not just a superficial, and it's not just from a work context, but you know them and they know you know them. And that is powerful.
Absolutely. And that's what we all want. We want people to know us. We want to feel like we're a part of something. That's exactly what we want.
I love it. Well, Tim, I think that's a great place, frankly, to wrap up the conversation. The desire for us to be known and to help leaders make sure they convey that. So, Tim, thank you for being part of the Leadership Growth Hour today. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, this is fun. Thank you. Hopefully I come back.
Absolutely. So for our listeners, please note that our next monthly Leadership Growth Hour will be in August at noon Central Time, when we will talk about how to build your executive presence and influence with leadership presence expert Aaron Ellis. To register for the future Leadership Growth Hours, please visit stewartleadership.com/events. And we'd love to have you join us next time. All the best, everyone. Take care.